Welcome back to another episode of Spirit of an Athlete. I'm your host, Amanda Smith, and on this episode, Stasia Rivera from Vivi Athletics joins me to talk about mental fitness for Gen Z and Gen Alpha. This was an eye-opening conversation for me, and I am still taking in what Stasia explained to me about these generations and how we should be coaching them, as well as how they show up as athletes. I truly hope you stick around to find out more about Stasia's course and her book at the end of the episode. As parents, coaches, and athletes, I truly hope you take in all of Stasia's amazing information. Enjoy the episode. Stasia Rivera, thank you so much for joining me on Spirit of an Athlete on this quite crazy day in my neighborhood. I truly appreciate what we're about to talk about because it's hitting home today for me.
It is. I feel like it was probably lined up just right for us to be together today, and loved our talk that we were able to have, and I'm excited to continue it.
Thank you. Oh, okay. So you work with Gen Z and Gen Alpha kids. What's a Gen Z kid and what's a Gen Alpha kid?
Good question. So most of our Gen Zs are starting to be in that 24 range to about 14. So somewhere in there is the cusps of the Gen Z, and then right below that we have the Gen Alphas. So 13 to kind of probably 2 years old. We don't know what the next one will be yet, but somewhere in that range, those are our Gen Alphas. So I like to think of it as like if they're in middle school right now, they're probably a Gen Alpha and younger, and then if they're in high school and college or starting to enter that workforce really early, that's a Gen Z.
It blows my mind that we literally have Alpha and Omega next to each other now. it's
Oh,
it's righteous uh, in
these
all terms of that word.
yeah.
So I have an alpha, is what that tells me. My daughter's 10 years old. She's a Gen Alpha. Why do you focus on these two generations?
We do. We consider ourselves generational advocates and for all generations. I think it's important for Gen Z and Gen Alpha to also understand the nuances of other generations. But we focus on the Gen Z and the Gen Alpha because we feel like there's a lot of misunderstandings around them. Some of the ones like we were talking about, like that they're mentally weak or they're not as tough, we can't push them, they quit. um, I'm seeing very different things when different conditions are there for them. And so that's where we really consider ourselves to be advocates is they're facing a different set of challenges than other generations, largely connected to technology and the
Mm,
influence it's had since day one of their upbringing. So Gen Z is the first generation we've had that had tech since day one, meaning really advanced tech, smartphone, and
yeah.
iPads and those types of things. And then Gen Alpha is even more because we're seeing this evolution of like AI and all of these different things that are going to influence their world. So
Right.
there's a big change in how that creates that baseline safety in our deeper structures of our development. And a lot of people just don't know, and it's okay. Like, not everyone rolls around wanting to know neuroscience and being super nerdy. But,
But we do.
it's something that we really want to advocate and simplify for people so that they can start to see the brilliance of this generation. They're also the smartest generation we've ever raised. They're able to do things and create and synthesize information in incredible ways that other generations can't because they didn't have that development. So there's always pros and cons, and we like to focus on the pros.
I love that. Okay, so I'm sitting here thinking like I am technically a millennial, which annoys me because millennials were, and this goes back to what you were saying about Gen Z and Gen Alpha and the tech. So millennials were defined as the first generation to have tech their entire life.
Right.
Granted, it was, like the most basic computer you could possibly think of,
Right.
right? And
Internet.
DOS. I
Right.
very much remember DOS, the black screen with the green type. Yep.
Yep.
And we
Uh,
were the first generation to have chat rooms. I remember sitting in my first chat room at 12 years old,
Yep.
sitting in, But but you said with Gen Z, it's the smart technology. How is that different than millennials?
So the some of the nuances that we see is I is the influence of so many things that the smartphone brings. So it's
Mm,
not just a computer where I sat down at a desk and the squeaky internet went off and I maybe loaded a page once a minute, in the beginning, to
right?
where now we have literally information in milliseconds. We have alarms, dings, bells, a structure that's intended to be somewhat addictive. And
Yes.
so that's a difference. That's a big difference. And I also feel like culturally, we're all kind of tapped out and maxed out. So the technology has become the off switch. I have my fingers in quotes because what
Mhm.
I consider it to be is a pause button. So yes, I might feel better for a moment, but then I come back to my reality. And this is where we're seeing we label these things as mental health epidemic, connection epidemic, addiction epidemic, but really what we're experiencing is a lot of very overwhelmed internal people that don't have the right tools to calm, connect, and do what they need to do on a daily basis with all these new modern era threats.
Okay. How much does social media play into this?
A lot.
Mhm.
Because, again, I'm not a proponent for some of the extremes that I've seen where it's like, "We've just gotta cut it off," and that's just not realistic. It's just not. But we do need to start to show Gen Z and Gen Alpha what impacts does it have, and can we take some digital detox time or have some structures in place that help us not have it take over? So
Mhm.
I like a great example is my own child. So he's an online student. He finished school. All of a sudden, he replaced that with a lot of technology time. And I kind of noticed it, but I didn't really say anything. So he's a highly competitive athlete, as I mentioned. So we drive 90 minutes for him to train. And
Yes.
we car, he'd had kind of a tough practice. We're in the car, we're talking, and I'm like, "Let's talk about what's happening, with you and your routines." Like, and he was the one that started realizing, "Oh, I've been really on a slippery slope with my tech, and it's actually making me feel different with my relationships with certain family members. It's affecting my tolerance." Like, so he realized, like, I'm on a dopamine high, and I don't want anybody to interrupt me, and now all of a sudden my sport is frustrating when it normally isn't because I'm not getting that good feel that I want because I've totally tapped my dopamine system. And he was the one that started putting that together. And he was the one that was like, I'm detoxing. Like I'm cutting it off. And because he knows he doesn't have an in-between personality. He just doesn't. So he's like,
Yeah.
and I said, okay, let's talk about what we're going to replace it with, because we have to feel good. We have to do the other stuff. So he
Yeah.
started to realize what those things were. So yeah, just right in my home, like these things happen to all of us as parents, mentors, and coaches, and we know, but how we
Mhm.
have to get back into what we call baseline is really important.
I wanna highlight this for the listeners. So, going on any tech, it doesn't matter what tech, it could be the TV, it could be, a simple game. They're getting dopamine hits when they
Right.
do this,
Yeah.
and those dopamine hits are affecting the rest of their life, and they need some downtime from it in order to recover. Man,
Yes.
that's like, for me, I wanna shout that from the rooftops because I know a lot of parents, and I'm doing it right now. We're recording this session, and I've got my kid on the TV downstairs. It was supposed to be a no tech day for her, but I knew that she needed that in this moment because of what's going on in my neighborhood, which is quite crazy. Uh, and I said, "You know what? Yes, go watch TV because it's gonna be her dopamine hit. It's
Right.
gonna be that thing that's gonna rebalance where she's at." So, are there times when we want our kids involved in tech, and there are times when we don't want them involved in tech. I think we've already identified the don't, but what about the do?
Yeah, I think that that's the larger conversation. I feel like we get this information and then we're like, cut it off, or this very black and white. The Surgeon General just came out and said that he wants to issue a label warning people about the implications of social media. And I'm not going to quote this exactly right, but roughly what he was saying is if a child is on fast dopamine, think phone, think immediate hits, right? That's a little different than a movie. Movie's a
Right?
little slower. It's a little
Hopefully.
you're a little bit more participatory. And in fact, a lot of Gen Z and Gen Alphas don't actually prefer movies if you talk to them because it's a little too slow. So I've had many people tell me this, and I'm like, oh, that makes sense. You've been raised to have it be faster and more intense. Your system responds more to that.
Right.
So in this study, what he also presented was if we go above roughly 4 hours, that significantly impacts mental wellness. And so again, what do we focus on? The mental health epidemic. But what I want people to start to focus on is why do we have one? We
Right.
have because of the reliance on tech too much. So, like you said, it's finding that balance and starting to see those shifts in our kids. Are they frustrated when you ask them to step off? Well, then you might have a dopamine piece, and I'm talking very frustrated or very
Mhm.
and so we have to start to kind of know what to look for to have a different conversation. But also we've got to replace it. What are we replacing it with? If we're going to take it, what are they going to get in return? What do they actually like? How are they going to develop as people outside of this? These are the
Oh,
questions that we're asking as the advocates and trying to encourage instead of nothing. What is the thing that's going to help them have greater sense of well-being? That's what where we want to be.
yes. Okay, so how does this play all of this tech piece play into athletes?
Good question. Yeah, I've seen a lot of different approaches to tech. I've seen teen cultures where they just completely are, we've given up. We don't care. We just let them have their phones 24/7. I've seen programs that it's like we put them away during certain times. There's just dead time that this is not, having a phone out isn't appropriate. So I think that it's again where the larger conversation is helping the team set the standard and start to create that buy-in and those rules and the idea of what the system is going to be and why. You know,
Mhm.
we get a
Uh-huh.
full idea or collective experience for the coaching staff and the team or the athlete and the parent or you know and I think because we don't necessarily have that ability to have nuanced conversations right now because of time limitations or skill limitations, we're avoiding
Mhm.
that, and we're relying on these extremes again, and those don't work. Those create really massive like kind of relapse behavior, right? Where it's just like all of a sudden I'm binging 12 hours because I haven't managed my day-to-day life and my day-to-day stress. And so
Mm.
then we have these nervous systems and athletes now where it's like go, 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 crash for an entire day and don't even peel yourself off the couch. And then okay, maybe I reset myself enough to try again. But, eventually there's a mental or a physical way that the body's gonna show that wear and tear. And again,
Hmm.
it's not out of choice, it's out of survival, and we have to have a different conversation to start to create choice.
Yes. How has this influenced the way coaches uh, if there's a coach that's been coaching for, say, 15 years, probably even 10 years at this point, how have they had to restructure, or how should we recommend that they restructure what they're doing to better facilitate one, the tech, to the kid who is going into this overload crash?
Yeah. Oh, good question. So I actually would love to share how I got back into athletics and I was really fortunate to have a mentor in my community that should have never lived in my community, small town. I had a coach that had coached at the SEC level, Pac-10 level. Pac-10 doesn't exist anymore, but we all know.
You know what it is.
So very decorated coach ended up randomly in my tiny community and coached me to the point that I was able to compete at the D1 level. Never would have happened without Joe Getson, my mentor. So Joe and I stayed in touch over the years. He would come and run camps. I coached. We just would swap stories, and then I moved out of coaching and into the counseling psychology, and we still stayed in touch. But one day he called me and he's like, "I can't do this anymore." Like, and this is he's a boomer. He's in that generation.
That generation.
He's already coached 3 different generation types. This was gonna be his 3rd, and he was just like, "I'm tapped out. I don't get it. I'm not connecting with these kids. I don't even know if I want to," and just being very candid and brave, honestly. And I just said, Joe, I've learned a lot on the counseling psychology side of how motivation works and how habits work and what's really going on with just generation. And I actually really appreciate so much about them. Are you open to talking? And so we just started a conversation. And then he was like, "This makes so much sense. Can you come work with my team?" So that was how I moved back to athletics. I created a 50-page manual. I was on a plane to Winona, Minnesota, and I was teaching this content to college athletes at the D2 level. And I knew it would work on a certain level because I knew once people understand how they're wired, the keys to the kingdom come back. You know?
Yes.
So because we give them that resilience back, you can do something about your anxiety. You can do something about what you feel like is depression, even though it's nervous system collapse, probably. We can do all of these things. And so we did. We began the journey, and I've been working with Joe's team for almost 5 years now, just and many other teams, but he's my favorite because to answer your question, Joe has completely changed how he coaches. So I was trained in an old school era where you got your butt chewed on
Mhm.
aggressively. You made a mistake. And Joe held a very high standard for me and my teammates. And it was just what I became accustomed to. It's how I coached when I left because that's what I knew. And but now Joe has completely changed. So some of the pillars that have changed is he takes the time to ask his athletes how they're doing. He takes the time to help them understand and implement the stress reduction techniques that we've learned. There's conversations about grounding and orientation and, taking in your environments and feeling your feet on the floor and having different discussions. And those are invitations that are coming in the huddles. He no longer raises his voice as often, but his team has the flexibility that they can handle it if he does because he's focused on connection, safety, and trust building. And I'm not
Good.
and so has the team. The team has learned how to embrace Joe and see Joe's best qualities, even if he has a place where he chooses to raise his voice or demand more. They're choosing to see where Joe is also evolving because this isn't a one-sided street. I don't believe that it's up to the coaches, parents, and mentors to bend every will to the Gen Z and Gen Alpha athlete. That is not what we are proponents of. It's about meeting in the middle. It's about understanding each other, having empathy, having conversations that get us on the same page. Instead of a team bonding pizza party where we just encourage clicks, we actually have team bonding that creates real conversations so that people can get on the same team and really start to have each other's back. And so it's been exciting to see because they went from losing record to they went from a 50-50 season 500 to setting the program win record for their sport. They had their first All-American. Just some really cool stuff has gotten to happen with this group, and it touches near and dear because Joe was such a person in my life, such a reason why I was able to enjoy and love college volleyball, and then now I get to be in the arena again and doing cool stuff with people, and it's just really special.
It is. Okay, there's 2 things that I wanna bring to light, a little more light that you brought up. You said connection, safety, and trust building are the 3 things that Joe focuses on. Connection was first. Safety and trust building seem like they're two things that most coaches understand and know that they need to do. It's that connection piece that I think most coaches need a little more info on. Would you be willing to share what does Gen Z and Gen Alpha need in order to create connection that doesn't look like that pizza party?
I love it. Yeah. So, sorry. Um, there's been some big shifts in, like I said, Joe taking the time to actually ask how the athletes are doing. We implemented a culture rule where if you were having a tough day, you just came in and named it as a team to your teammates. You didn't try to hide it. Your teammates already know you're off. Why are we trying to pretend like we're okay when we're not okay? Like, I'd rather the teammate just name it and not have to feel like they're suffering in silence and struggling. And instead, they just name it. And then all of a sudden, it goes away most of the time and they're
Mhm.
fine. And they just practice. And the team knows how to properly support them. And so does the coaching staff. So we just started implementing some radical honesty templates within the training protocol where there was just places where we would get radically honest. And some really cool transitions that happened for Joe. All of a sudden, athletes are knocking on his office door willingly, not scheduled. All of a sudden, he noticed like the kids put away the phones on the not I don't want to call them kids, the team, the athletes put away their phones and were in the back singing again. He was like, it reminded me of when I coached you guys, and they're back there singing, and the All-American carries the cooler off of the bus, not the freshman. And everyone is participating and everybody is pulling their weight. And he was like, it is crazy to see the shifts that have happened because we're having more candid conversations. We're being radically honest with each other about what we want. And that's what the byproduct of winning is connection. When connection and safety are established in programs, winning happens. If you have the physical talent, obviously, if you don't have the physical talent, that might be a little tougher, but you could still do it. We've seen physically less capable teams have mental game, mental fitness at the highest level, and boom, they're on the path to success. So those are
I
some things that we've implemented. Lots of other things that I can think of, but that connection piece is really just comes down to creating the time. Just the 2 minutes to check in, the 2 minutes he got a lot better at giving direct feedback, and telling athletes what he liked about their performance, and then giving the feedback of what he wanted to have happen and why. I This is a generation of why, and that puts a lot of us experts on blast because we wanted to just be like, "Because." Well,
because I said so.
well, Gen Z can go find 5,000 other coaches on one click on YouTube, So it's all about the connection for them. And that's where their restored resilience comes from. If they know you have their back, they're like any other generation we've coached. There are
Um,
little nuances. Like I'll give you one more example. So Joe and other programs I've talked to, they're like, I get so frustrated that if I just change practice 1 hour, or if I add an extra session in, they just freak out. And it's like, it really bothers me. It's entitlement. And I'm like, okay, let's have a conversation. I'm like, okay, do you like it when somebody just randomly throws something in your schedule? Probably not.
mhm.
And yet you're flexible, you adapt because we have those social rules that we've learned where it's like, I'll just hold that anger in or I'll just like be fine, even though I'm not, And so what I was able to kind of explain is like, I don't think we understand how they're really hanging by their fingernails in their day-to-day life. Everything feels really intense for many reasons. They're a generation of surveillance. We follow them around 24/7. We can know if they're at the practice gym or they're at the library or they're somewhere they shouldn't be. We can know whether they got an A on their test or an F within milliseconds. We don't understand the implications that that has on their internal safety system. We just don't get it. So if they're already having to perform perfectly and then having to manage these really intense schedules and all of these things, one little shift is going to feel like life and death to that type of nervous system. So if we don't have that flexibility and that trust and that safety, then I am going to see that as a threat to my day or to our relationship coach athlete. And I'm going to struggle. So while Joe doesn't love that, or other coaches that we work with don't love that, they've learned how to honor that and at least have some respect for that. So, also on the other side, the athletes have. So, if the coach comes and says, guys, we're adding another practice, they know their coach has thought about it and has a reason why, and they have that trust, right? It's not like I'm throwing a bomb in their court and expecting them to be okay. So, there's
Right.
this mutual connection. It's not one sided. The athletes have to be flexible too. That's not
Mhm.
fair for it to just be coach, parents, mentors caretaking them. Also, it's not fair for coaches, parents, and mentors to not have respect for the athlete as a human being and where they're coming from.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. There's a couple of things ruminating for me. At college, we have housing and food, and our friends group or our team that we have connected with. Maslow's hierarchy, the bottom, the foundation is food, water, shelter. And then the
Yep.
next step above that is safety. What do you know about kids who aren't in college and that foundational level isn't that stable?
Yeah. Well, we know they're gonna have deeper challenges in that internal safety. I mean, when basic needs aren't met, then we know that alarm bells are going off and there's a high
All the
stress.
time.
And that's gonna show mentally or physically, right? The kid might
Mhm.
be more emotional, either internally or externally explosive, but they also might have physical symptoms like chronic tummy aches or anxiety attacks or those types of things because that basic safety structure of connection and, the basic needs of being a human aren't being met. And I actually this came out probably almost 10 years ago, but I loved it. It talked about when Gen Z was very first coming out, that they're the first generation to invert the high
No.
needs. So they're the first ones that are actually focused on well-being, which is the very top, as
Yeah.
being the primary thing that they want. And they're even willing to sacrifice some of the other things to have well-being and self-actualization. That's the top. So, they're the first ones, and when I heard that, my mind went like, I was like, "Oh my gosh." Like, that's spot on. And, so
Having
we're
that moment for you right now because my
yeah.
brain's just like, "Holy crap." Because when you think about like, I was taught that once you get to that well-being state and you wanna level up to the next level, you go through that triangle all over again, but if we invert it, they don't care about
Not as
the
much.
the foundation that we would all suspect you need because that's what we've grown up with. Oh, I
Right.
love this.
Look at our work environment right now, as we play this out a little bit further. They would rather work remotely, make a little less money, and live more freely and be able to have flexibility than lock themselves into a night, a 40, 50 hour a week job where they get paid more. And they're like, no, thank you. I appreciate it, but I don't need that. Whereas just two generations before that, the
Choice.
boomer generation, the baby boomer generation, that was how they were completely raised. Was you follow the line. I just had a beautiful
Mhm.
conversation with my parents about this last night. How they were just like, "It's this, and it's this, and it's this," and my mom shared this awesome story. Her background's nursing, and, she talked about how she went and did this quick exercise. I'll summarize quickly, but they basically made you write 10 things down that mattered to you, and then they just made you as she went through her lecture, she just had you cross off 2 things, and my mom described how much harder it got, and I think what she was saying is this is like the aging process. We start to lose things as we go. But I think
Mhm.
what I talked to her about last night is that is being inverted because now Gen Z and I think Gen Alpha will closely follow are like, no, I this list is my priority. This is how I'm doing life. And I'm not gonna cross things off. I'm gonna make it
Wow.
work, and the rest of this will all I'll figure it out. Whatever. And I think we really just it's a kind of a mind blow because it's so different, just 2 generations to watch that transformation and that
Wow.
of life. And we just don't realize I mentioned the 24/7 surveillance, but we also just talked about what you guys are going through right now in your home and the
Right.
difference in what kids are being exposed to and what safety means in their world. And we don't realize how much that is not a conscious choice. Okay. The lower our structure is in our nervous system, our brain stem, then our midbrain, those are autopilot things. It's like Velcro. It's going to stick to it. And so we don't recognize that there's a lot stuck to their system that we
Yes.
just simply did not have to experience, period.
Truth. Yes.
Yeah. And there are
Wow.
things that other generations have experienced that are in their Velcro too. Don't, again, it's not a one side story.
Right.
But
Right.
when we think about the intensity, the amount, the frequency, that's what we're really seeing and why we're seeing a shift in what we then label as, oh, well, now we have a mental health problem. Oh, well, now we have a lack of resilience. Oh, now we have mentally weak generation. Do we?
No, they're just different. They just do it differently.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can't highlight that enough on this episode, honestly, because that is the rhetoric right now. We're weak. We have become weak. No, we've become different.
Yes.
So in I'm gonna let the community in on this one. So we have an active situation in my neighborhood right now where we know that we are hunkering down in our homes. So it's an active situation. And my 10-year-old is scared. And this is something that she's had to deal with year in and year out at her school because of active shooters at schools. And I live near Columbine. I live near STEM. These two schools, one was the most recent and one was the first, if you will. And this is what we're dealing with when it comes to mental health, and seeing how my daughter responded to what's happening in our home right now and what's happening in our neighborhood it's intense. But this has become her new norm.
Right.
So it's just different than what it was for us. We in schools we were practicing tornado drills and fire drills. She's practicing active shooter drills, especially around 420, which is when Columbine happened. And we seem to have issues like that consistently here. So it's just different. And thinking about this from a flipping the hierarchy, Maslow's hierarchy, just I'm still sitting with that. That one's going to sit for a while, I have a feeling, because for me, I'm thinking about it from a neurological perspective. That shifts how we treat her neurology. And you mentioned this too with athletes, what we're seeing more often, and this is across the board with these generations, whether they're athletes or not, is it's super intense and then idle.
Yes.
And the label that a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists would throw at this is ADHD, right? We have a whole generation of kids who have ADHD. Is it really ADHD or is it just the new normal?
Exactly. I think we're getting better at defining what neurodivergence is, the spectrum of all of it, the autism,
Mhm.
ADHD. And I think because of neuroscience, I like to remind people that 90% of what we know about the human brain has happened in the last 10 years. So
Yeah.
most of the people in the general population don't know those shifts. We're still kind of stuck to these old adages that we've been told that are easy for us to believe. And so I think what we're really seeing is we're not guessing anymore. We actually really know what's happening internally. And we're
Yeah.
seeing the neurodivergence tree. And a lot of it is tied to the early tech imprint. And the tech is kind of, in a way, replacing that caregiver connection, self regulation piece over the person because we're all kind of tapped out. I mean, stress levels are higher amongst all generations, but Gen Z reports the highest stress of any generation we've ever raised. So again, there's that advocacy of connecting what's been different for them. And we
Yeah.
know what it's been. We don't have to guess. We know. And then we have the PET scans and the brain scans and the imaging to know exactly what's going on. And you're
Yeah.
right. We are seeing more divergence in learning because that's more how they've been patterned to learn, to look at many things and put it together. And that can be a superpower when somebody is regulated, when they
Yes.
are in their safety system is in baseline. That is going to be a skill that we need because being able to put together abstract concepts into one is something that machines aren't going to be as good at for a long time. Emotions are the second thing. I always say the two things we've ignored are the two things that Gen Alpha and Gen Z are going to have to show up to: having tough
Yes.
conversations and admitting that we're emotional creatures and beings, and being able to do those two things. Those are the two. Like, and I just feel like um, we've got a skill set we've gotta kinda catch up to, but we have the science. It's not like we're guessing. These aren't theories or ideas. They really are simple hacks and tricks that can help restore that resilience and that well-being and feeling like I can manage my day and my life and my performance in this way with athletes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. Stasia, holy cow. Okay, we've come full circle. We're back to the tech.
Yeah. Yep.
You have a book coming out.
Yes. I'm
What's
so
your book about?
Yeah, so we really saw the need. Our programs are tailored towards athlete-centric focus. We wanna focus on them first, but we really saw the need to start to talk to the coaches, parents, and mentors about what we've been talking about on this podcast, and so we really started breaking down how do we bring these islands of connection and safety and awareness into the athlete relationship so that they can perform and you can actually enjoy the process too as a coach, parent, and mentor. So that's what
Yay.
the book is about. It focuses on just really simple tools to start to create what we say is like a life worth living, and that is really where performance it shines the most. The wins are the byproduct of all of that, and, we've seen that time and time again. So we've just kinda broken it down into daily things that we can do and ways to see this and continue to have the conversation about what's unique about each generation with the technology and how we call it a tech waterfall. It's kinda like it started off with radio, and records, and then it's just increased. So we break that down. Yeah.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Okay. You also have a course that is in the same vein, but not necessarily for the coaches, but for the athletes.
Yeah. So that's
Give
our
us a little.
level advantage course. So we really saw a need for athletes that are working hard to get to the next level, college and pro, or a really elite high school experience with club. They have a need. They're whenever you're changing and going up a level, there's more that's required. And so what we know about elite athletes is they put a ton of hours into the physical training. And when you start to get more elite, there's only so much better physically you can get. So the game changer really is the mental fitness side. And so that's where we just started really breaking down these principles we've been talking about in the show, empowering athletes to really understand how they're wired in very simple ways in their day and to be able to manage that in what we call our four stripe system. So they're able to live their four stripes each day and be able to really start to repattern their nervous system and get that flexibility and that resilience and that enjoyment back in their sport.
I love that you call it mental fitness because if we called it anything else, it would just be work. And as athletes, we're like, "Yes, give me more of that, please."
Right.
Right? Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Stasia, oh my gosh. All right, where can people find you, find this course, find your book?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is so exciting. So viviathletics.com is where everything is at. You can book a call with us if you're looking for that one-on-one experience where we're coaching you individually or a course makes sense. We like to just make sure we've got the right fit. The book's there when it's launched. Everything's going to be in that place. And you can follow us on socials at Vivi Athletics Official. And Vivi spelled Vivi. That means living, to be alive. That's why we call it that, our company name. So yeah, you can find us there.
Love it. Stasia, thank you so unbelievably much for joining me on this crazy day in my neighborhood and on Spirit of an Athlete.
Thank you for what you're doing. I'm so glad we're connecting, and I just appreciate the messages you're bringing forward. And it was awesome to be here. I appreciate it. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Thank you. So fun. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Spirit of an Athlete podcast. If you're struggling with your own gut issues and want more direction, you can get an initial body scan from Amanda at bodywhisperhealing.com. In 20 minutes, you can find out what's wrong, get clarity, map the path forward, and get on track to get back in your game. If this episode hits the spot, please let us know by rating, reviewing, and sharing it with a friend. Subscribe now to hear more inspiring stories from other female college athletes who overcame their health issues. Want more, Amanda? Get inspired by finding more at bodywhisperhealing.com.